Hello, book people. Welcome back to my little corner of the internet, if you can even call it that. I am back from what I would consider probably about a 2-month hiatus, but it doesn't really feel like it matters all that much because, I've just kind of started making content, so I feel like I'm still kind of getting my footing. But I thought that today I would combine my August and my September wrap-up videos into one because I didn't do one for August. And I have to do one for September. So I just thought, well, why not just make it into one video and talk about a whole bunch of books? It might be a little bit more rapid fire than usual, but I want to get it done all in one video. And I also have already filmed the August wrap-up video, but I just kind of realized before I started filming this and decided to do them in one that the one I did prior did not include the books that I DNF'd, and I'm pretty sure I DNF'd 2 or 3. So I want to include those and maybe even talk about why I DNF'd them. But like I said, I want to keep this kind of rapid fire, talk up the rating, what I liked, what I didn't like, move on. Because I've got a lot to get through and I don't want to sit and edit for a really long time because that's been the biggest roadblock for me. So I guess just to start, a little life update. I'm in university now, so I have become extremely, extremely busy. I feel like I probably even look exhausted because I am. I'm tired. I was not prepared for the onslaught of schoolwork and readings that I'd have to be doing. And I've heard a lot of people talk about how university can take the joy out of reading, and I can understand where that comes from. It hasn't happened to me yet. I am still reading for pleasure as much as I possibly can, but I can understand how some people lose their will to read or to live in university. And I'm only in first year, but, I can understand it. So without further ado, we're going to start with the books that I read in August and then move on to the ones I read in September. And I will say August was a really good reading month leading up to school. I am super, super happy with everything that I read because, September, everything fell apart. I read one really, really, really good book, and it was at the very end of the month. And I started off my October reading month really strong. I cannot wait to talk about the books that I've been reading. But anyway, let's start talking about the books. So the first thing I read was As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. Seems like a little trend that I've been reading a whole bunch of Holly Jackson, but I really, really do like her writing style. I mean, it feels slightly formulaic, but I don't know. She makes it work. She keeps me turning the page, and, I have a hard time putting down her books, but I read As Good as Dead. And as a close for the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, I thought it was really, really strong. I thought it went in a completely different direction than the other books. And I felt like the stakes were just so much higher, because they were. So, yeah, I really loved seeing Pip in, this sort of badass. I mean, she's always been a badass, but this was, top-tier badassery for Pip. But, yeah, I think that was probably my favorite book in the series. And I think I rated it a 4 or 5 stars. I'd be very surprised if I didn't rate it a 5, but I can't remember. But yeah, that one was really, really good. I am kind of having trouble recalling it now because it has been a while, but I can remember, the most central sort of things that happened in it, and I just felt like there was so much more tension in this one, and I liked how much more the characters felt grown up compared to the other books. I can't think of, the time between each of the, crimes that happen, but I feel like it's years. Is there not, a year in between each of them? Maybe not. I don't know, but it kind of felt like they got older over, the series, and I really, really enjoyed that. Sort of starting with year 1 in Harry Potter and going to the very end of the series, that's a little bit more of a long-term evolution over, a lot of years, but it's still, a neat little watch the characters grow up before your very eyes on the page. So, yeah, I really liked that one, and I've got one more Holly Jackson novel to read, and then I have read, I think, everything that she's published, so very excited to get to that book. Next up is The Naturals. I have such severe beef with Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I read The Inheritance Games, or I started reading The Inheritance Games a really long time ago. I was, tabbing it and annotating. I don't know why. Personally, I don't think that book is worth annotating, but I immediately fell off. I think I probably got 20% in and stopped reading it. And then I came back to it probably a year later, and I finished it, and then immediately forgot what happened. I think that Jennifer Lynn Barnes has a very, very special talent in being able to write a book where 75% of it is absolutely nothing, and then the last 25% something happens and it gets wrapped up within 5 minutes. And if you love Jennifer Lynn Barnes, that's fine. I do not care. People can like things that I don't like. And if you feel like I'm being too harsh, that's just my opinion. But The Naturals felt the exact same. I didn't really connect with any of the characters. I felt like they were pretty stereotypical, which, people compare it to Criminal Minds if Criminal Minds was teenagers. And I can totally understand where they're coming from. And even Criminal Minds feels pretty stereotypical with some of their characters. But I just don't think that The Naturals made it work. So I think I probably rated it a 2 or 3 stars. And, I was hoping for something that felt fast-paced and cozy. It got me in the fast-paced. It was not very cozy, and it was just not very interesting. I read it really quick because I wanted it to be over, not because I wanted to know what happened. And I also felt like a lot of the things that happened in it were really predictable, so I don't know. That one was a pass for me. I'm pretty sure that I ended up giving it to somebody immediately after because I couldn't find it in my books, but I personally didn't think it was worth the time, and I was really hoping that I would like it. I thought, you know what, I'll give Miss Barnes another chance, and she wasted that chance because that was just not a pleasant reading experience at all for me. All right, on to my first DNF, which is so disappointing. I have been looking at this book for years, I think probably since it came out, which I don't think was that long ago, but it's still been a few years now, and that is Ace of Spades. I don't know what it was, but there was something about how juvenile the characters felt, and I'm pretty sure they're in high school, so, high schoolers are juvenile, but I don't know. Some of the things that were said in the beginning of this by the characters just really put me off. I was like, are we seriously talking like that? It just really didn't work for me. And a lot of people are saying, oh, this is a great, YA, dark academia, intense book, and, oh, it's such a ride, and so much stuff happens, and it feels so, sophisticated. I really didn't get any of that. Granted, I did not give it a very fair shot. I don't think I even got 100 pages in. Maybe I will. I still have the book. I didn't completely give up on it. I might go back to it, but I just found that it was super, unlikable from the very beginning. The book itself, not even, specific characters. Obviously there is one character that is particularly unlikable, at least in my opinion she was, but I just really didn't connect with it, and I am not one to DNF things that early. I love to power through a book that I'm not super sure about, but this was one where I was just I cannot get behind a single thing that I'm reading right now, and so I put it down. But the one tile that I have in my book journal on my book bingo is to read something that is dark academia. And I was hoping that this was going to be that book, but I do have The Secret History, and I have If We Were Villains, so I don't know, maybe I'll just have to pick up one of those instead, because this was just not it for me. But I did get it on sale, so I can't say that I, spent a huge chunk of money on it and I feel like I wasted it. But yeah, I've had my eye on this for such a long time, and I was so disappointed, but I don't know, maybe I'll pick it up another time and I'll feel differently, but for now, this was just not for me. Next up is The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. I actually listened to this as an audiobook. I didn't read the physical book. I forgot that I still had it. When I started the audiobook, I thought that I had donated this. And then I found it on my book cart, right on the front of my book cart, so I don't know how I missed that, but this book is this is such a difficult one for me to judge because an audiobook is such a different experience from reading something physically. And I felt like the audiobook did have some good qualities, but I do feel like if I had read this as a physical book, I would have DNF'd it, probably. I think that this book would have worked so much better if it was a mystery novel, and it had, rather than the FBI talking to one of the butterflies, it could have been, the FBI sort of getting involved. Or, I don't know, the butterflies uncovering what the hell is going on in the garden. Which I guess, in a way, that was sort of happening at all times. The butterflies were kind of figuring out what was going on. But a lot of them knew and were sort of relaying the information to one another. It wasn't very, mysterious. A lot of things were just revealed verbally between one another. So I feel like it could have been really, really great as a mystery because there was a lot of, interesting stuff going on. But I feel like this barely scratched the surface of what it could have been, and it was sort of a letdown for me. Listening to it was a lot more interesting. I felt a lot more engaged. I traveled a lot this summer by the train, so I was like listening to it on the train a lot, which was a nice way to pass the time, honestly. But I don't know. I feel like there was something lacking from it. And, you know, when you're reading a book and you're like, this could be so much better, and the things that you're applying to it mentally are better than what you're actually reading, that's a problem. You know, it happens and you're like, it's like when you predict an ending, but the ending you predicted is better than the actual ending that happens. You feel disappointed because you're like, why am I coming up with something better than what's actually in the book? So, yeah, I don't know. And I thought that there were just some really, like, unnecessary things happening. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm not going to get into it, but I felt like the whole book was sort of unnecessary because I didn't think that there was, like, a driving point to it other than to just, like, describe something horrible that happened, which, to be fair, a lot of books are like that. I can't say that I haven't read my fair share of books, but I feel like there has to be more intrigue for that to actually work. You know, I could compare this kind of just a little bit to Womb, except it doesn't make me as viscerally upset as Womb did, where, you know, a bunch of shit happens and you're just like, why? Like, what was the point? Why? Because you could say, oh, well, it was because the character's parents, like, did this to him and that's why he did this to her. It's like, but there was no intrigue in the novel that made it worth this journey, right? I'm totally ranting right now. I didn't hate it. I think I gave it 3 stars, but it just, there was no point to me, and I just really did not connect with it. So, I did finish it, though. This was not a DNF. I did finish it. And I think it was 3 stars. The next book, I barely gave a chance. It was the Literally Dead book club pick, I think, for August. I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones, and I was so excited because I've heard so many good things about Stephen Graham Jones's books, and I started it, and I was so fucking confused. I was reading it, and I was like, what is happening? The narrative is, not even the narrative, just the writing itself, in my opinion, was super hard to follow, and there was just so much going on that, like, did not make sense to me. I think it was just the way that it was written felt super convoluted and, like, stilted almost, and I keep saying that I couldn't connect with things, but I think that that's, like, a really good sort of way to not, like, rate things, but sort of gauge how you feel about something is, like, how much you connected with it, and I just literally could not connect with the writing at all. So I, much like Ace of Spades, barely gave it a try because I just kind of felt, you know what, this is not what I need right now. I didn't buy it physically. I have it on my Kindle. So if I choose to go back to it, I still have it, but I don't think I will. I didn't love it. I will say that some of the things that happened in it that I did end up reading were insane. Like, I think that book has something going for it in terms of, like, plot. I just couldn't get past the writing. And that's really unfortunate because I'm sure if the writing worked more for me, I probably would have enjoyed the book, but it just, like, really didn't. And I only think that some books are worth the struggle of difficult prose. Like classics. You know, trudging through a classic can be so worth it by the end. But I just didn't think that this was worth the effort, so I DNF'd it. The next book is Big Swiss by Jen Began. This was exactly what I needed at the time, and it was so, so good. This was a reading experience where I genuinely lost count of the pages, and I would see the page number I was on after I started reading, and I'd be like, whoa, how did I get here? I read so much. Everything about this was perfect. And when I was doing my reading journal, and I had to choose, I do like a little book bracket, and I had to choose between 3 books to make it to, like, the next tier. I ended up fucking up the way that my book bracket works, so I have, like, the months grouped into 3, and then from each of those 3, I get 1, and then there are going to be 4 books at the end of the year that I have to pick from instead of doing the months by 2. It got really messed up. It was an accident, and I just kind of went with it. So this was up against Half a Soul and another book that I'm going to talk about, so I'll mention it later. And this one would have won if I hadn't read that other book, because this was so, so good. And I felt like I connected with Greta so much. I also connected with Big Swiss a lot. And their relationship was so interesting. And I feel like books that explore the sort of darker side of your mind, of a person's mind, rather, is so, so interesting. Because you can look at it and you can think, wow, that is the most fucked up thing I have ever heard, ever, that someone has thought. But then you think about it more and you're like, but I probably would think that about this as well. So it sort of puts things into perspective, because you're like, you're confronted with the fact that a lot of the sort of like depraved thoughts are kind of human and can also happen inside of you. And I really love being confronted with that, because I'm like, whoa, am I a terrible person? It's just fun. It's interesting. It makes you think, and I love books that make you think. And I think that I really, really, really indulge in weird girl literature, so it's called on the internet. And this is something that I would consider like quintessential weird girl. And there is just, so far out of everything that I've read, and I have been reading a lot, so I feel like I can say, like, out of everything I've read, this is probably the most, like, weird, depraved, interesting weird girl novel. And also just the premise itself of, like, a transcriber for a sex therapist sort of becoming obsessed with and falling in love with one of the patients. Like, just the fact that she'll be seeing Ohm's patients out in the wild and be able to recall things about them from their sessions, that was just brilliant to me. So I thought that everything about this book was perfect. I rated it a 5 stars, and I will definitely read it again. It went immediately onto my favorites shelf, which I think I might have already done a video on that, but I might be getting another shelf, and then one day I should just show all of my favorite novels, because I'm starting to get a huge collection of books that deserve to go up there. And it's wonderful. I love having books that I love to read and want to revisit. It's great. And this month was probably my biggest Holly Jackson month, because the next 2 books are Holly Jackson. I'll talk about them each separately, but the first of these 2 is 5 Survive, which I read on my Kindle. Actually, I think every single Holly Jackson book I've read, other than the next one I'm going to talk about, were on my Kindle. And then I own The Reappearance of Rachel Price. So I don't know why I didn't just do them all on my Kindle, because now I like have an uneven amount of her books. It's kind of annoying, but I read 5 Survive. The main character is Red, and I go by Red in the wild, in the real world. So I thought that was kind of cool, because I was like, whoa, that's the name that I use. So yeah, it was really fun. I don't think I liked it as much as the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, but the stakes were pretty high, and also the way that the mystery unfolded was like completely like apart from anything I could have imagined. So I did really appreciate the fact that Holly Jackson kept me guessing and wondering, and, you know, like considering that maybe all of the hypotheses that I had were wrong. And I love being challenged like that. It was I wouldn't consider it like challenging to read so much as it was challenging to figure out, and I loved that. So that was super fun. I'm gonna move a little bit faster now, because I'm almost at the end of my August books and I just want to get through them, so we're gonna move on. And this is the last book I read in August. It's Killjoy by Holly Jackson, and this one I really don't have a whole lot to say about. It's a novella. It's a 1920s themed murder mystery, like dinner party that Pip gets invited to, that Connor hosts. And the mystery isn't like an actual kidnapping or murder or anything. It's just like a game that they play. And I thought that the ending of this, the way that it unravels, is hilarious. But I mean, a little bit lackluster, because it's like, you read all of Holly Jackson's books and then you get to this and you're like, I mean, okay, like, sure, I wanted to be in the world again, and she served this, and I ate it up, but I mean, it was like, it wasn't her best. So, I don't know. I think I would revisit this if I was, like, really, really wanting to get back into the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, but not commit myself to a full novel. But other than that, I don't know. It's not necessary, I wouldn't say. I don't think that you have to read it to, like, get the full picture. But it's very cute. It is very cute. And I think I rated it a 3 stars. So the lowest rating that I've ever given Holly Jackson ever is a 3. All right, so now on to my September reads. Technically, I read 5 books, but one of them was a DNF, but I DNF'd it at like 60%. And I'll explain why when I get to it. But the first book that I read was a reread, which was My Dark Vanessa by, what's her name? Kate Elizabeth Russell. As I said, this was a reread. I read this when I was 15 years old. And I gotta say, revisiting it now, I'm not very much older now, but I think that I am old enough now to fully grasp the gravity of this book. When I was 15, I read this and I didn't fully see what was really, really, really wrong. I wasn't a dumb 15-year-old. Like, I could see, oh, student sleeping with her teacher and he's being absolutely disgusting and awful. Like, I wasn't, just completely blind to that. I totally saw what was happening and thought, that's awful, but I didn't feel it very much. I was the same age as Vanessa, so in a way I was looking at it a bit more personally, which you would think would probably freak me out more. But I was very stuck on the fact that I felt a lot like Vanessa, and I really, really found solace in the fact that she put words to things that I felt that I didn't know how to put words to. But I couldn't fully understand what older Vanessa was going through and why she was doing the things she was doing and being so in denial. So reading it now, it hit me like a bus when I put it down. I did not cry the first time I read this, but I finished this and I was like in my room alone. It was dark outside and I just put it down and I started crying. And that was super cathartic. So, I don't know, I think revisiting it now was a really, really good thing for me to do because I felt it down to every single atom of my being. Like, it was so, so difficult and awful and just heart-wrenching. And I think that there's something about revisiting heavy books like this that is so, so important because you just see the picture a little bit fuller every single time that you revisit it. And I think that this is a book I will continue to revisit throughout my life because really, you can read it when you're 15 and you are the same age as Vanessa. And maybe it's a little bit beyond what you should be reading because you're a 15-year-old and you're still a little baby. And then you read it when you're 18. And, you're still young and you may not have experienced anything quite like what's happening in the book, but you can grasp it a little more. And then maybe you read it when you're as old as Vanessa, you're in your 30s or you're like in your 20s. And it's just like, wow, she was so young, right? I don't know, maybe I'm blabbering, but this is an important book. And I think that everybody that reads it benefits from it, at least a little bit. Because even if something like this hasn't happened to you, it's still a heavy hitter and it's still a very poignant examination of the mind of a 15-year-old and a child and how it protects itself and the way that evolves into adulthood. So I could talk forever about this book. It's one of my absolute favorites, but I'm really glad that I reread it because it hits so hard. Next up, I've got Tomb Sweeping by Alexandra Chang. This was obviously a Book of the Month book, and I was trying to sort of clear out the Book of the Month books that I haven't read yet because I think I had 2 at the time, and now I only have 1. So I just wanted to read this because I was renewing my subscription, and I wanted to make sure that I had sort of, finished the ones that I had already bought. But the one that I've left is, really, really long, so I gotta get to that eventually, but not yet. Anyway, so this has been on my shelf for a little while. It's a collection of short stories that sort of incorporate a whole lot of different things, but I believe that Alexandra Chang is Chinese and she goes into sort of Chinese culture a little bit in some of the short stories. I feel like I go through this every single time when I read a short story collection where I just really don't love it. I will say that there were some stories in this that were really strong, but I think that's just sort of a caveat with a short story collection is that you're going to have 3 to 4 really, really strong stories, and then the rest of them kind of feel like filler. So the first one was very striking and very confusing, and I didn't really get it, but I really liked it. And then there were a few others where I thought, yeah, okay, this is doing something for me. And then by the end of the book, I was just kind of like, it wasn't great. I do really like Alexandra Chang's writing, so I think that if I could ever find a full-fledged novel of hers, that I would totally pick it up and read it. But as for the short story format, it just doesn't work for me. And I feel so bad every single time because I continue to buy short story collections thinking it's going to be different, and it never is. But I don't know. I still think it was enjoyable. I still think I'm probably going to keep it on my shelf because there are certain stories in it that I might revisit, but I I don't think that this is totally 100% like worth my time. That sounds so mean. I don't mean it in like it's bad and not worth my time. It's just like, it is not what I would pick over reading something else, I guess. But yeah, I got it on Book of the Month, and it was just what seemed interesting to me. Actually, based on the name, I thought it was going to be a horror, like, short story collection, but it wasn't. So I was a little bit disappointed, even though I could have just read the synopsis, read the description, and realized that it wasn't. And also, like, looking at the cover, it does not at all look like horror at all. I mean, maybe, like, that one. I don't know. But yeah, so that's Tomb Sweeping. And this is my last DNF of the video. It is The Butterfly Lampshade by Amy Bender. And I feel so horrible about DNFing this because I was probably 60% through. And not only that, it's a first edition. It is signed first edition. And I didn't like it. I just didn't. I thought that it was really, really boring. And it didn't have that hard-hitting literary fiction weird girl sort of like impact that I thought it was going to have. It is an interesting examination of sort of like parental relationships, like child to mother, and then sort of like how that affects the rest of the family. But I don't know, at a certain point I just didn't really care anymore. I feel like it was sort of saying the same thing over and over again, and also just like the writing itself was very dull, unfortunately. And I don't know, none of the characters felt very fleshed out. I mean, even like the mother character, there wasn't a whole lot going on there. And I like to connect with characters, and I just did not feel that at all. So that was this one. And to finish off the video on a high note, I have Blue Sisters by Coco Malors, which this is my first book by her. I'm pretty sure that she's got this one and Cleopatra and Frankenstein, Cleopatra, one of those. And I really want to read that, actually. It's on my list, but I am so glad. I'm so glad that I picked this one. I knew that it was popular online, and I saw that Book of the Month had it, and I went, you know what? That's the one for me this time. And as soon as I finished Tomb Sweeping, I went, okay, this is the one. And I picked it up, and I just devoured it. I thought it was so good. All of the characters felt so incredibly real to me. And I love when I can really like dig deep into what a character is doing and what they want and what they're trying to do, but what they're doing instead. There was a whole lot of like circling around in this book where the characters were, the sisters rather, were like wanting to do the right thing but not doing the right thing, and you know, like actively thinking I shouldn't say this and then saying it. And there were so many like troubling moments where it's like, this could have been fixed if you just didn't react like that, but they did anyway. So I thought it was really wonderful. I thought it was just so heartbreaking, but also like uplifting at the same time. And the way that this ends really worked for me because it kind of comes full circle in a way. If you read it, you know what I mean. And I also just enjoy the fact that you start at kind of a low place with everybody, and then it gets lower, and then it does sort of rest at a higher place for the characters. It doesn't necessarily get to like peak happiness, but you do see the characters come to a place of contentment, and I really, really, really liked that. So this is the book that won out against Big Swiss and Half a Soul for my book bracket. And I think rightfully so. I think that this might be one of my favorite books of the year so far. It's just not really like anything I've read before. I love reading sibling stories, and I haven't read very many of them, so this was sort of like, you know, first of its kind for me. And I really just, I can't do anything but praise the writing of this book. Coco Malors knows how to write a book, I gotta say. The sisters, just the way that they like interacted with one another, although extremely frustrating and at times really sad and like disturbing, was also like extremely heartfelt and at times like super funny. And there were some really hard hitters in this one in terms of like the lines. I've tried a new annotating method where you don't use tabs, you just sort of underline things, and then at the very back of the book you have a little page with like your themes written down, and then you put the page number, and I have been loving that. I think it works super well. But anyway, here's one of my favorite lines from the entire book. It hit me really hard. Their family had always been good at hellos and goodbyes, moments ending even as they began. It was easy to love someone in the beginnings and the endings. It was all the time in between that was so hard. I love you too, Avery said, without the two. Lucky smiled. It was something Nikki used to say. Not two, just love. Oh, it had so many, as Lexi would say, Newly Nova, there were so many bangers in this book. I love the way she speaks. I wish that I could somewhat emulate that, but I'm not even going to try because she does it best. But there was so much good stuff in this book, and I was annotating it, just feeling so much. I was just feeling so much. I was feeling so much joy and so much anguish, and I feel like when a book really makes you feel, that's a good book. So it took me a little bit to mentally recover from this one, but I definitely think that I'd read it again and re-annotate, because I'm sure that there were plenty of things that I missed that would take a second reading. But oh my gosh, guys, if you have a book of the month subscription and you haven't gotten this book, please get it. If you're gonna listen to anybody, listen to me and get this book, because it's really, really good. It sounds like I'm like sponsored to say that. I'm not, but yeah, this was like the top book ever. I would probably pick this book over every single thing, maybe other than My Dark Vanessa, but over everything that I've read in these past 2 months. All right, so I got through all the books. It ended up being kind of a long video, but you know what? I'm going to edit it. I'm going to post it. It's going to happen because I want to keep this alive, this channel alive, even if it's, a video every month or something. I sort of had a weird moment when I was editing the last video that I recorded where I thought, well, I haven't really hit any sort of place with YouTube yet where I've got like a substantial amount of people watching. So if I just stopped, it wouldn't really matter. And then I thought, okay, sure, but that shouldn't make a difference. You shouldn't go into making YouTube videos just for, the view count. I mean, of course that is sort of, a central point of YouTube is that you have people watching you. But I think that getting into it, if you're doing something that you enjoy, you should be focusing on the thing that you enjoy. And then I thought, well, it's kind of embarrassing to do because, I'm filming on my phone and I have like not a great microphone and, I'm not as funny or interesting as like other people that I watch. And then I thought, well, that's really unfair to me that I am just saying all these really horrible things in my head about myself. I was like, that's just not fair because I enjoy doing this and I do read a lot and I love talking about books. So why should I, squash my own enjoyment because I think it's embarrassing? That makes no sense. That's really dumb. So I'm still here. If there's anybody watching that has been watching my videos, thank you. I appreciate it because I do get like a little bit of views and I see that and it makes me really happy. And I hope that if there are people watching that they enjoy what they see and that they continue to follow along with whatever reading journey I have and am having. But it's definitely uplifting to see. I got one comment on one of my videos and it was like the first comment that I properly got, and it was someone telling me that they were a new subscriber, and I was just like, wow, that is really nice. So you're not necessarily in it for those types of things, but it does make you feel nice. So yeah, I'm gonna try and keep the channel updated. I am going to just post videos completely recklessly and just do it whenever I want. I'm not going to stick to a schedule because the schedule is either really good for my brain or really hurts my brain. And in this case, it really hurts my brain because I'm like, I have to post on a Friday. And then if I don't post on the Friday, I think, oh, well, that's it. No more posting. We're done. So I'm just going to post whenever I want. But yeah, I think I should be able to do another reading vlog soon. I mean, when my reading week comes, I should be studying for my exam, and I probably will. No, I will. Not probably. I will. But I could probably film a reading vlog in that time because my other reading vlog is doing like pretty well compared to my other videos. And I want to do another one. I don't know if it'll be a romance reading vlog because I don't know if I have a romance novel that I can read on hand. But if I do, I'll film another romance reading vlog. Anyway, this was pretty much just like a sit and chat type of video. But you know what? I think I needed to film something like this. So anyway, Thank you for joining me, and yeah, thank you for being here. If you want to find me on social media, I have my Goodreads and my Instagram in the description every time, all the time, every video. I don't post on Instagram a whole bunch, but I am active on Instagram. Like, I go on Instagram a lot, so if that's anything, I hope you join me in my next video, and I have nothing else to say. Bye!